Well, hello, good afternoon, everybody from Ireland, where I'm broadcasting today. My name is Niall, and I'm happy to join you today to share some information on sustainability functionality in Business Central, and particularly what's there and why it's there. Before I start, I'm just going to quickly share some information on upcoming webinars from Areopa. You can find all the information on the Areopa Academy website. After my presentation today, the next one is coming up in June from Jeremy on Markdown's Magical Mermaid. We'll also have some another session in July from Jose Miguel on killer AI prompts, and then later in July on the 21st from OpenAI to AL auto-generating strongly typed REST API clients for Business Central with Simon and Tobias. And with that, I'm going to switch back to today's topic and begin by sharing the agenda. So first of all, we're going to start quite logically, I think, with explaining a little bit of the importance of sustainability and then connecting that to what Microsoft has been doing in Business Central. So, looking at the regulatory situation and also just the scopes, the different types of greenhouse gases and so on. From there, we'll actually move on to looking at sustainability functionality inside Business Central, what's been delivered already, and then we'll have a look ahead to what we expect next from Microsoft on the Business Central side. And at the end, I will look to reserve some time for Q&A. I will probably ask to hold questions till the end, but please feel free to add your questions in the chat during the session, and we will come to them, and I will answer as many as I can before we wrap up the session. So first of all, who am I? I'm Niall. I'm a product manager at 4PS. We are a construction-focused ISV with our 4PS Construct Business Central solution. I live in Ireland. I've worked in the tech industry for many years, and most of those years have involved some interaction with the world of Navision, Nav, and now Business Central. And I'm really happy to be able to join you today and talk on this important and interesting and emerging topic for us in the Business Central world. Okay, so let's move on to the why, the importance of sustainability. Why sustainability matters. It's really environmental is the one that's most recognizable from all the efforts to reduce carbon footprints, conserve resources, and ultimately to mitigate the adverse effects of climate change. But there are also social responsibilities, and as a business, you're looking at maybe supporting communities, ensuring fair labor practices, how you deal with and treat your employees is really an important part of the wider environmental, social, and governance sphere where the sustainability reporting and analysis ultimately sits. There's also economic benefits, of course, because sustainable practices don't just benefit the environment, and they also they should introduce efficiencies when it comes to the way that you operate, and therefore to cost savings, innovation, and long-term profitability. You may also have heard the term ESG reporting. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. So this is the previous slide related to the context of what the different areas are. This relates more to the reporting. So when you hear of ESG reporting, you're looking at being able to gather data and produce assessments and data relating to environmental aspects of your business, social aspects, and governance aspects. And there are many benefits to putting the effort into developing your ESG reporting capability as a business. One is transparency and accountability. It demonstrates that you're trustworthy when it comes to stakeholders, that you are committed to sustainable practices. You're willing to take the time and the effort to try to capture data on your business activities as it relates to the ESG sphere. Also, for attracting investors, it's increasingly important for investors to prioritize companies with strong ESG performance and credentials. And finally, risk management. The better equipped a business is now to handle capturing, for example, the carbon dioxide emissions associated with their activities, the better equipped they'll be to handle regulatory, social and environmental risks in the future. And that's going to be really important as more and more regulatory requirements emerge from various regulators around the world. If your systems, in this case Business Central, are already equipped and well able to capture, and you're used to reporting on this data, as a business, you're in a much better position to be able to meet the regulatory requirements that are coming. On that note, let's look at a couple of the different initiatives that are happening regarding mandatory reporting or regulatory reporting. The first is the EU Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. So this applies to the European Union. It is already rolling out. However, it is a long-term initiative and it has been changed significantly in February of this year, essentially reducing the reporting burden. So it's already in effect for large public interest entities since last year. There are no further milestones this year or next year, but in 2027 and in 2028, as you can see there, those companies and entities in scope are gradually increasing, albeit they're generally larger organizations who will be in scope for the mandatory reporting that comes with the CSRD. And by the way, when we post this webinar recording on the Areopa YouTube site, I will also add in the comments links to some data sources, including the official regulatory websites for this and for the UK sustainability reporting standards, which is also interesting just to compare. Also in the process of being evaluated, published and finalized. So we're expecting some very shortly publication of standards, which should then be ratified by the end of 2025. And it should mean that no earlier than 2026, businesses active in the UK would need to be recording their emissions data with the purpose of then being able to report in 2027, for example. Now, those dates are not yet final, but that's what's the current expected implementation timeline. So that just gives you a picture of the regulatory situation on reporting for the European Union and for the UK. Now, there are other entities around the world, other reporting frameworks, but these are quite representative of what we can expect to see. The next is the UK sustainability reporting standards. It's not to focus on them too much, but just they're a good example of the sort of topics that need to be included. So they're like a good template of what typically is required in ESG reporting. So you're reporting on things like material sustainability risks to your financial performance as a company, dependency on fossil fuels, for example, and an inability to change that. Climate-related disclosures based directly on your activities. There'll be lots of industry-specific metrics. So something like the transport industry will have very different metrics to the construction industry, for example. Supply chain is another big one. And then integration into financial reporting. So while you've already got financial reporting and you've got the emerging area of regulatory and general ESG reporting, it can also be that the two are merged somewhat together. So in a company's financial report, there may be narrative and numbers on their emissions, for example, mixed in alongside their financial data. Okay, so let's bring it a little bit closer to Business Central now. What are the greenhouse gases and emission scopes? You'll see these in the Business Central functionality. And the first one is, well, first of all, what are the gases? Carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. These are the three greenhouse gases under the scope of the Paris Climate Protocol. So these are the ones that you have to record your emissions for. And there are then three scopes of emission. These are essentially scope one is direct emissions arising from the actual core business activity that you're doing, whether it's producing a product, delivering a service. Scope two is the emissions relating to the energy that you directly consume in performing your business activity. And basically scope three is everything else, and is a very broad and quite difficult scope to to lock in on, because you've got to think about upstream and downstream of your business, even down to things like employees commuting to a facility to do their work. It's not directly part of the emissions related to the production of your goods or services, but it's an indirect activity that wouldn't otherwise happen if your business wasn't functioning. And that really broadens it out. Also downstream, you've got to think about the subsequent use of your products, the eventual disposal of your products. It's a very, very broad one and very difficult to identify how to report on properly. But those are the three scopes, and they all relate to the three greenhouse gases. Okay, so that's the why. So let's now move into what's actually there in sustainability functionality in Business Central. We've got, at its most basic level, a solution that delivers emissions accounting. It is very similar and familiar to all of you who are familiar with financial accounting in Business Central. The concept is the same, except instead of accounting for money, you're accounting for emissions. And let's now have a look at the basic process. So we're going to start by looking at setup. Then we're going to talk about some journals. We're going to post something, look at some basic reports, and also mention some APIs that are available. Before you start using the functionality and before I start showing you any of the functionality, you do just need to check that the sustainability app is installed in as an extension, the Microsoft Business Central sustainability app. That's where the functionality sits. And also, if you want the demo data, which I would very much recommend, it really helps with your understanding of the setups in particular. You'll need to generate it from within the Contoso demo tool for the sustainability module that's shown there. And finally, probably less significant, in the user setup, for any users who you want to act as a sustainability manager in your business, there is a new flag on the user setup that you can do. To my knowledge at the moment, it only has one function, which is it restricts who can be an owner of a scorecard, which we'll talk about in a little while. Otherwise, all the other sustainability functionality is available to all users, though, of course, like any functionality, you could set up specific permissions to control who has access to what. Now, let's move on to the setup. So this is the sustainability setup inside Business Central. We'll talk about the role center in a moment, but the sustainability setup is a fairly substantial setup at this stage. But all the typical things you would expect also in an equivalent to a financial setup. So units of measures, your base your unit of measure code for your emissions, water and waste, decimal places, whether or not when you're journaling, you need to always mention the region or country, and likewise responsibility centers. So if, for example, you have multiple facilities or plants and you want to be able to report on emissions by those, you might want to make that mandatory. You still can do it without taking those, but they're just not mandatory. And a few other settings around what you can't do if you change setups after you've already posted to the ledgers, enabling an error check in the background on the journals, which seems like a very good idea. And then some settings around procurement, which we will come back to. They will make more sense once you've actually gone into some more of the functionality. And then just some on calculations and reporting. You can, for example, in your all-up reporting, you can choose to report in a different unit of measure, in this case tons, compared to your day-to-day ledgers where you're recording in kilograms. And then moving on from that, I'm just going to make sure that we're covering the things in the correct order here. The sustainability account categories. So this is defining your emission sources and assigning them to those scopes that we looked at a little while ago, and also specifying which greenhouse gases they emit. So back to the setup, and within the setup you can find the account categories, and you can also find them on that role center that I was on a moment ago. This is the demo data plus one little addition of mine from the Contoso, which is, as I say, very good representation to help you understand. You can see really what you're defining is the top level types of activity that you're going to be recording against and what scope they belong in. So, for example, you've got your combustion directly related to your activities in scope 1. You've got energy sources here in scope 2, and then you've got a broad set of third, slightly more distant upstream and downstream activities travel in company cars, hotel stays, that sort of thing. So it's a very broad mix of different things that fall within Scope 3. And here's where you're defining which gases apply to each one, because not all gases will apply to all scopes. In fact, it's pretty much extensively CO2 plus the others, less so. You've also got water and waste, which are new. We'll come on to those towards the end of the webinar. But that's your top level setup. If I go to the subcategories, which is the next level down, now we're getting into the details, and what these really do is specify the emission factors, the default emission values that you associate with each unit of measure for each of the categories. So if we drill into the company car, we've got large, medium, and premium, and when you're entering these, you'll be entering them in kilometers, and the emission factor of CO2 is the amount of, in this case, kilograms that is associated with each unit that you travel in this company car. So when we come to journaling in a moment, we'll see that that is used as a default, which we can then use to calculate the relevant emission factor. So that's the subcategories, and you've got those for drill down beneath each one of the categories. So now let's move on to actually doing something with the data. And for that purpose, the most basic thing we've got is a sustainability journal. And the sustainability journal will look very familiar to anyone who's used to working with financially related journals. If I go to here, we've got a default journal. I'm going to put in a line for today's date. I'm just going to preserve the standard data. It's useful for reference. But let's say we have done some driving in our large company car. So 13322. It will fill in the account number because we'll come on to the chart of accounts in a moment, but we've mapped a sustainability account to a category and subcategory from our setup. We then need to specify which unit of measure. In this case, it's kilometers, and now distance. So if I've traveled 400 kilometers in that car, I should now get a calculation of 59.6 kilos of CO2, because that's your, remember from the setup, your unit of measure that you're tracking your emissions in. That's all I need to do at the most basic level. I'm just going to do a quick filter here to keep the rest of the data while I just post the one that I've done now. And if I post this, let's now naturally switch to the chart of accounts. And by the way, you can do something similar on a purchase document. We'll see that in the context of something else a little bit later on. It's not quite the same, but it's very similar. But the ledger is the most, or sorry, the journal is the most fundamental thing to understand. That's where you can enter and calculate your emissions data. And then the resulting sustainability ledger entries go into a chart of sustainability accounts. And this is the official structured record of the emissions data that you've just posted. So if we look at our chart of sustainability accounts, you can set it up any way you like. This is the, again, the default with your scope 1, 2, and 3, and then all various accounts. And if I drill into one of the accounts, you can see that it's mapped to a category and a subcategory. So that's how it was able to default the sustainability account on the journal line when I filled in I looked up the account rather. It was able to know which category and subcategory related to, and therefore which emission factor to use when I was calculating that CO2 based on kilometers. So you can see, as you'd expect, a net change in balance, but for all the different gases here. And if you drill down, then you can get into your ledger entries. Okay, so that's the sustainability chart of accounts. There are also some standard reports. These are all in Excel layouts. They're starting point that you can use to extract data and see what you can do in terms of Excel reporting. They do have new improved layouts in BC26, so you can run them here from the chart of sustainability accounts. You've got total emissions per facility, which of course you'd need to have been filling in the responsibility center for if you wanted to do that, and by category. So if we just quickly look at total emissions, I'm not going to apply any filters. I'm going to generate an Excel report, and once I enable all the sources. I should get some data coming in here, which will be pulled directly from the various tables inside Business Central. So there we go. Emissions summarized by scope 1, 2, and 3 with some sample graphs, which you can filter on. Emissions by period, all again filterable, and the split across the different gases as well. And the other two reports are also look very similar. These are not the official CSRD or any industry standard, but they're useful as your company's way of recording the and reporting at a basic level on the activities that you've been doing. So those are the standard reports. You can also do ad hoc analysis, which is means going to your ledger entries and using the new analysis mode, or relatively new analysis mode in Business Central, and you can set up your pivots. Drilling down on your, in this case, the different types, the different categories, and showing the sum of the emissions across them. Or of course, you can generate one using Copilot. So that's ad hoc analysis that you can do directly on the sustainability ledger entries. There is also a set of sustainability APIs. These serve to both bring data into, in most cases, into Business Central, and also to push the data out. The tables covered are the category and subcategory, which we've seen already, the account, which is the account from the chart of sustainability accounts, journal lines, and the resulting ledger entries. All of them can be both taken into Business Central and pushed out, except for the ledger entries, of course, which you can only retrieve. They're read-only. You might be using other systems, other applications. You might be maintaining your sustainability, your emissions data somewhere else. Business Central is not meant to be the top level system that takes care of necessarily all of your ESG and environmental, social governance activities. There could, for example, be HR systems in play. If there's physical tools and plant in a business, there could be telemetry running on those, even with IoT devices on engine runtimes and things. Those are not things that belong in an ERP system. So Business Central is likely to be one of multiple sources. And that's why you need these APIs, either to bring data in or to push data out into a different application, for example. So the APIs are available for the key tables that you might need during your activities. So now we've done the basics. That's for the fundamental understanding and the foundation of the solution. Let's now take it on to the next level. We'll look at role center, some KPIs, carbon credits, fees, certificates, all those things. So the first thing is just to make you aware of that role center. It is the Sustainability Manager role center, which should be listed here, and he's the one that's already loaded, hopefully. And it just gives you a nice collection of the different sort of metrics and so on that you can use as a sustainability manager, and it just brings some relevant KPIs, Qs, and of course the various menu items together in one place. Then scorecards and goals is the next one worth looking at. Scorecards are available through the menu here on the top of the role center, and basically they're a way of gathering together some KPIs and metrics for your business. They're like a top level way of gathering goals around what your targets, your limits are within your business. This is the one area where that user setup flag for Sustainability Manager applies. You can only be an owner of a scorecard if you are a sustainability manager. And from here, they serve essentially as the ways of collecting what are called sustainability goals. And sustainability goals are targets that you can set for your business that are based on baseline periods, start and end dates, and have target amounts target values for CO2. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but for this period here, you're saying that I don't want to exceed 2,000 kilos of CO2, 125 of methane, etc. And then you can compare it to your baseline value, which could be from the previous quarter or previous year, and then of course with drill downs on the current values for the relevant period. You can set up several of these, but whichever one you set as a main goal is the one that appears on this part of the Sustainability Manager Role Center. So naturally, you can't have loads of different goals on here at the same time. So this is the one that I only have one. It's marked as a main goal. Main goal makes it appear here. And that's where you get the goal appearing. And you can track it as you go along. Okay, so that's the scorecards and goals, closely related. You can also define carbon credits. This is where you wish to purchase a credit to offset your activities. You do this by using an item. So you create an item and you say that the item is a carbon credit. All being well, I have created at least one already. And on the item card, you specify the value and the equivalent of the carbon credit. Yes, here's a carbon credit that I created. And there's a sustainability section at the bottom of the item card where you just turn on this toggle. And then you say how much it is per unit of measure. So it's 1,000. Each unit of this is essentially the value of the credit is 1,000 monetary units for each UOM of the I think it's in tons in this case. But in any case, that's how you specify your greenhouse gas credit, and there's these other fields here relate to different aspects of the setup. They just happen to be all under the sustainability fast tab. But by doing this, you can then purchase this credit. So you can go on to you can basically buy this credit, put in a quantity, and then when you post the purchase, you get automatically a posting to the sustainability ledger, and you can say on the purchase which for example, which account you want to hit. So if you want to target and say, I'm buying a carbon credit to offset my air travel, for example, you can be very specific about where you want it to appear in the sustainability ledger, because that's going to post a minus value to the emissions to offset your activities through the carbon credit. So that's simply how you set up and do carbon credits. You can also, if you wish, you can choose to set up internal carbon fees. So these are like surcharges that you can apply internally within your business, and you can set them up against different gas types. And what's also important here is probably the most notable thing on this screen, if I go into it, is the carbon CO2e or CO2 equivalent. The emission fees are up here, so they're not on the main menu. You have to go into the setup to get to them. You do need to be careful here with your starting dates and ending dates. I've had trouble in the past where I couldn't get various postings to come through, but the reason was that the dates weren't right. And but over here on the right, it's the carbon equivalent factor. This is what's ultimately going to be used in regulatory reporting, for instance. It's the common currency. It's like the reporting currency of emissions. So you can't mix kilograms of carbon dioxide and methane. So you need to pick a CO2. A CO2 equivalent is the industry standard. So it's basically saying what 1 unit of CH4 equates to in carbon equivalent. And therefore, ultimately, when you post through, you're going to get a CO2 equivalent for everything, which is the all-up value that you can use for your analysis and ultimately for your reporting. So I say that's the emission fees. I wouldn't see them being used as much, but the fact that these are in here and they have starting dates makes them quite important, these carbon equivalent factors here. The next area I'm going to look at is certificates. So you can record sustainability certificates against vendors or against items. So if I go to a vendor, for example, I should be able to find on the vendor card, here it is here, sustainability certificate number. So you can have a net zero certification, for example, and then you can filter on the vendors that have that certification. Of course, the only thing that may, I'm not sure, may be developed beyond this is, of course, what the question is, what would you do if you have more than one certificate for a vendor? Right now, you just put it on the vendor card, so you can only record one certificate against a vendor, but at least it does allow you to do direct filtering. Likewise, the exact same principle applies on the item. That little fast tab I showed you at the bottom has a sustainability certificate on there that you can specify. You can also analyze within financial reports. So if we go to financial reporting in Business Central, the former account schedules, we can find an example where you can put the emissions data within the structure of these, or in fact you can use the structure of financial reports to actually build a completely ESG focused report. You don't need to mix it in with financial data. So in this case, if we look at the structure of this and look at the definitions, the row definitions, it's all sustainability accounts. And it's doing the exact same as you do in a normal financial report. It's showing the totaling rows and so on. So this is a dedicated emissions one. This one, hopefully maybe one that mixes the two, but in any case, you can, if I go to the definition on this one, you could put in, I don't see any sustainability here, but essentially on the drop down, sustainability account is now one of the options there. So you could list something about your emissions alongside your financials, all within the same template. So that's another way of doing analysis on the data. Okay, so now we've gone through the foundational functionalities, and then the sort of second wave, which was delivered in 2024, wave 2. And now there's another round of new additions in the most recent release wave, and the current release wave, I should say, 2025 wave 1. So let's switch to having a look at some of those now as well. And the first one is default sustainability values for accounts, items, etc. This is a really important addition. This table summarizes where you can specify a default sustainability account. So from the chart of accounts, so you're saying what, for a given item, for example, what type of activity does this always relate to? It's a purchase of materials of some sort, and there's an embedded carbon factor associated with those. And then for most of them, certainly for all the detail level ones, not for the top level GL accounts or item categories, you can also specify default CO2 and the various gas emissions per unit of measure. So what that means is that when you purchase, for example, an item, you can set it so that it automatically calculates the emissions based on the and posts them to the sustainability ledger based on the default that you put on your item card. So if you just have a very quick look at the item card, it's down in that sustainability section. If I go to the lamp here, I think I've got some values put in. So yes, the default sustainability account is specified. And then I say that for every unit of this lamp I purchase, I want a default CO2 emission of 12 kilos in this case, and some methane. And then every time I actually buy one of these or transact on one of these, it will automatically record the relevant activity in the ledger. So it saves you having to do a completely separate round of ledger activity or journaling activity to represent the impact of, for example, purchasing some of these lamps. You can also control the visibility of these in the sustainability setup. So earlier on, when we were in the initial setup screen, there was a whole load of toggles in the middle. They were controlling whether or not you can see these fields, because of course, not every business will want to use this in the same way. There's quite a bit of data on there. So if we go into the setup, it's item emissions, resource emissions. There's all different there's all different flags that control what you can and can't see in the setup. Another new area that's been added, is very new, just been released, is water and waste management. So far, every time we've talked about recording anything, it's always been about the greenhouse gases, and now literally the scope of the solution is being increased to include water and waste management. So this would be the water and waste management as captured during your activities. It can be different types of whether you're consuming water or contaminating water, disposing of contaminated water, and likewise different water types, which would be surface water, sea water, groundwater. And the setups and the concept is broadly similar. If I just go to the next slide, the way to think of it is it's like another scope, basically. So instead of going through the gases and the scope 1, 2, and 3, obviously this doesn't relate to the gases, but it's like another scope. So on the account categories, the top level specification, where you are mapping them to scope 1, 2, and 3, what you're now doing is you're mapping any waste or water related categories to either waste or water, and then you can define subcategories within those. And then when you're journaling, when you specify the account, you're entering in essentially values into different columns on the journal to represent your waste or water. And again, it's in predefined units of measure from the setup. We just have a quick look at a journal here. You scroll across, we can see that you've got some water intensity and discharged into water waste intensity type, water type. These are all quite specific terms relating to ESG and to sustainability activities. But essentially, when you're capturing this certain type of activity, those columns become relevant and filled in, and you can specify those values so that the posting fully records the activity against the water or waste correctly. You can also capture sustainability data with general journals. This is simply a sort of a time saver where you can, if you're working within a general journal and you know what the total emissions are relating to a particular line that you're entering, you can enter that information directly onto the line. So if I go here and I can specify a sustainability account number in amongst all my normal fields on the general journal. So we've got the sustainability account number, the total emission of carbon dioxide in this case, not per unit, but just the total amount because it's a journal line. And again, when I post this, it will post automatically to the ledger in the background. I don't have to go separately to the sustainability journal to do my posting. The next one is in public preview, but it is subject to change until general availability, which is quite far away in January of 2026. And what this is introducing is the concept of a sustainability value entry, which is a subsidiary table to the sustainability ledger entry. And it's capturing the CO2 equivalent in the background for items along the value chain. And along the value chain means when you're purchasing or manufacturing or producing or assembling or transferring or selling, you can be potentially based on the defaults like you saw on the item card earlier, or through direct entry on a document line. You can, when posting, have it automatically not just record the emissions in the individual gases, but also to create value entries that are in CO2 equivalent. And that table will become the basis for extraction into official regulatory reporting, because it is the foundational reporting currency essentially of the emissions. So this is all newly introduced, and it's really to streamline the collection, calculation and reporting. Collection in the sense that you can default the CO2 emissions onto various entities, like particularly items, I think. The calculation then happens when you're posting your normal activity. I'm going to attempt to post a purchase invoice in a moment and see if we can get an item to generate a value entry for us. And then you can also use it for your reporting. And in particular with scope 3, because scope 3 is that very broad scope, which would be very hard to pin down. So if I was to just quickly raise a purchase invoice, I'm going to create a new one. We'll create it for this first vendor, and we'll stick a vendor invoice number on it. And let's purchase some of our Amsterdam lamp, which we know has those values on it from earlier. I'll purchase 10 of them, and it should already, and indeed it has already worked out the CO2. It was 12 per unit, so it's worked that out, and the CH4 for me. So that's good. If I now go ahead and post this, hopefully it'll post. And we'll then have a look at the posted document and the entries. Yes, let's have a look. We will drill down on find entries, and we should now see a sustainability ledger entry and a sustainability value entry. And hopefully our value entry, and indeed it does, has a CO2e amount actual, just like a value entry in the normal context. It can also be expected. It's equipped very much like regular value entries, and this is where the actual basic, most foundational reporting information comes from, through the value entries. So that's new, very new in the application, and as I say, it may be adjusted a little bit along the way, but essentially that's the concept, and across all of those activities that I've listed there. There's also a new out-of-scope emission category that's just been released. The out-of-scope is a way to avoid being blocked, where you want to record an emission, but you're not quite sure yet where to put it, with the intention that you will come back later in the journal and presumably reverse your original posting and then actually assign it to something with a scope. It's also useful when you need to post a carbon credit that isn't related to a scope. So just a general carbon credit that your business has purchased and that you want to put into the sustainability ledger, but you're not going to attribute it to any particular activity. You can use this new out-of-scope emission category, and all it is, as you can see there on the account categories, when you drop down, you've got your 1, 2, 3, you've got your new water waste, and now you've also got an out-of-scope. So of course you'd only be using it on an exception basis, otherwise you're not capturing the correct detail on your resulting ledger entries. Okay. So then that brings us to where we are now with what's in Business Central. The next thing, of course, to look at is what we know of that's coming next, and that relates to the remainder of 2025 Wave 1, which runs from April to September inclusive. And it's these items here, and we're going to start by having a look at Copilot. This is expected to be in preview as of June, but the idea is that you would have a sustainability Copilot that would estimate greenhouse gas emissions based on descriptions and input parameters, and adjust potentially your emission factors for future use. We kind of await a bit more detail on exactly what the scope of it is going to be. But you can imagine it's dealing with some ambiguity and also trying to make sure that your data, your actual base setup data, is as up to date and accurate as possible. So really interested in seeing this. AI is also, certainly for me, an area of great interest, and seeing this and the sustainability come together is, I think, really interesting to see what we can do with it. So that's due for a preview in June, and no doubt we'll get a lot more detail then on what to expect there. There's also a video as part of the Business Central launch event for this release wave, where it's covered in a little, certainly in more detail than I've covered it today. So it's well worth a look if it's one that you're particularly interested in as well. Another is improving analysis with a new Power BI sustainability app. So we're taking the data relating to sustainability activities and bringing it into Power BI. So already you've seen the standard Excel reports, you've seen the ad hoc analysis, you've seen how you can embed your sustainability within financial reports. But this is taking it to Power BI, and we're starting with greenhouse gas emissions, various metrics, visualizations, realized emissions versus target, etc. Probably better if I show you a screenshot. This is kind of a good representative example. Various analyses based on the data from Business Central, of course. Also carbon CO2e, carbon equivalent analysis. Social analysis can relate to metrics in your data relating to your employees, for example, the gender mix within your business, and also things like certifications, training that different employees have. You can do analysis on that as well within this Power BI app for sustainability. So expect it in June, so next month, and very much look forward to seeing that as well for general availability. Then use ESG reporting integrated with Business Central. So there is a separate Microsoft Project ESG reporting app which is intended as I think of it as a sort of a common portal where you can do reporting that is in the format and template of various regulatory requirements. So you can see there CSRD assessment. And the idea is that you can bring data into here that is from various sources and then represent it in the correct reporting format. So going back to a point I made earlier, Business Central I would not expect to be the top level primary source of all your ESG data, nor your actual official platform where you're generating your regulatory reports, for example, for the CSRD within the European Union. This is a separate app which can do that, a separate Microsoft app, which also, of course, means you can have data coming in from various different applications and sources into this as well. And the idea is that what we're expecting in preview in September will be an integration, the standard integration between Business Central and this app to enable you to push your relevant sustainability data into the app as a basis for your official reporting. Enable taxonomy elements for various standards. So we're likely to see more kind of data mappings within Business Central that relate to official structures of data that are required for various reporting directives. So data mapping, those categories, those subcategories may have additional attributes on them which you tag to say that they belong in a particular category under the definition of CSRD or the ESRS in the UK or others. So you're starting to tag your data with essentially I think of it as metadata to enable you to prepare for data reporting according to the various standards. That's also expected in public preview in September. Then we have generate a CSRD preparation report. So following on from the previous point, if you're actually not planning on integrating with a reporting tool, you can generate a report layout under this that would serve as a preparation document for CSRD reporting. So the idea is that it will use the official structures and taxonomies, the groupings of data, the totaling and so on, to actually generate a report that is what it's called a preparation report, I guess, because there would still be other potentially bits of narrative that you would need to insert yourself to explain various points, for instance. So it's not a final report, but certainly it would bring the data into a format that would be expected for CSRD. So this specifically relates to the incoming requirements for the European Union. That's what's in the remainder of the release wave, and that also brings me to the end of the content of this webinar. I will add these links. I would suggest that you look at the Microsoft Learn documentation for existing functionality and what's new and planned. So for the current release wave, both cover all the topics that I've covered today. And also the launch videos, those bite-sized videos for the 3 release waves now that have included sustainability functionality. And there's quite a few, especially in the most recent current wave, where there's specific topics on sustainability that are covered quite comprehensively. So these will all be added to the comments for the webinar on the REOPA YouTube channel, and those couple of links to the various regulatory sources that I mentioned earlier as well. So with that, I'm going to say thank you to everybody for joining and for watching, and also to Luke for inviting me to come and talk about this topic today. I will have a quick look in the questions and the chat. I don't see anything coming through there. So that's, I take it that it's been reasonably clear in that case. And I will thank you once again. And if there are no further questions in the next moment or so, we will close the webinar. And as I said at the beginning, don't forget to go to the REOPA Academy website, sign up to the newsletter, and register for any future webinars that you're interested in. And of course, through the recordings through the website, you'll also be able to see this webinar on demand whenever you want. Great, thank you very much, and wish you all a very good day.